Hello everyone, this is Perfume Coast, so welcome to my channel. Today I'm excited to introduce my podcast, which will be fully dedicated to yet another new release of 2025 by the brand YSL, which is called Libre Vanille Couture. So without further ado, let's jump into the ocean of perfumes. So this release appears to be a flanker of the original, and as far as EDP concentration is concerned, it goes back to 2019. And as far as the new one is concerned, let's dive into the notes that Fragrantica is listing. So what we deal here with is bourbon vanilla, orange blossom, vanilla caviar, lavender, and rum. So initial opening of this one is very much like original release and some other flankers such as Intense or Le Parfum. I detect the same lavender forward DNA to the point that I'm a bit disappointed. But then, in about 1 minute, some transformation is happening. Vanilla starts to come out, and in quite a prominent way. This vanilla is not one of those designer-like, cloyingly sweet, vanillin-like characters. This vanilla is only a touch sweet, but very creamy, almost buttery in fact, and quite thick as well. It gives off some starchy, wheat flour vanilla, if that makes sense. And there are elements resembling Xerjoff's release Allende, which I happen to have in my collection, and this one gives me a similar association. But of course, wheat flour vanilla reaccord in that one is front and center and a lot stronger. While here it's a bit more quiet by comparison, but nonetheless, as far as this flanker is concerned, this buttery, hardly any sweet vanilla with wheat flour faucets is the main theme for major part of this fragrance. I do not detect necessarily any rum, but maybe again it's here just to support this main vanilla theme. So closer to the dry down, however, I'm slightly disappointed yet again, because this original Libre DNA comes back. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I dislike Libre lineup. In fact, as you will see in a bit, I have quite a few Libre line releases in my collection that I happen to enjoy. But it's that I wish this buttery vanilla at what point in time was going into dry down more distinctly without being joined by anything, especially not by run-of-the-mill family DNA. Another negative is that when vanilla is rejoined by Libre OG DNA, it sort of loses at one point its own main character, vanilla. But it sort of represents this nondescript combo of residual vanilla and OG for a while. But what's interesting and comforting is that in the air I'm still getting strong whiffs of a lot stronger buttery wheat vanilla, almost the likes of what I've described earlier, which in the air gives a hint of vanilla cake baking in the oven. I just wish this beautiful and unconventional vanilla was a bit brighter and prominent. Another interesting feature is that I gave this perfume to my husband to test out, and on his skin this perfume is straight fougere like lavender, so this classic masculine bat. And I really need to involve my mind power and imagination to detect any vanilla hint. And if one is present, it really is a hint of one. But this very thing makes yet another interesting discovery as far as this release is concerned, as it also appears to be quite versatile in terms of who can wear it. So there we are. This release, having so many paradoxal parts, certainly deserves to be tested out, because at the very least, it may come across quite different depending on individual skin. Let alone that it surely has this delicious niche-like buttery vanilla, wheat flour-like accord in the middle of this fragrance. And also the same thing is happening in the air, especially in the dry down. This vanilla character sort of comes and goes, and yes, I wish it was stronger, but then again, maybe on your skin it will be. But real star of the show is deep dry down, where this buttery, cakey but fluffy vanilla shines. And that's where I can really detect this gorgeous vanilla, both smelling my hand up close and in the air. So this release is certainly the one to test out. It also appears to be, in my view, most gourmand leaning of all Libre releases I tried, including Le Parfum release preceding this one. So, but then let's get reminded of some flankers that I happen to have in my collection. And let's start with the original EDP concentration, which came out, as said before, in 2019. But first, let's get reminded of the notes that this one is having. So according to Fragrantica, on the top we've got lavender, mandarin orange, blackcurrant and petitgrain. In the middle there's lavender, orange blossom and jasmine, and finally in the base there's Madagascar vanilla, musk, cedar and ambergris. So to me this perfume gives off a bit of plasticky, play-doh-y concoction of sweet and herbal faucets. I remember myself first time smelling this perfume about 3 years ago, and at that time my collection was limited, but it mainly consisted of niche releases. So this one at the time smelled much of a designer-like, high-streety DNA. And me being fan of lavender, I couldn't smell any of it here, probably expecting the strong, unfiltered accord the way I had used to. But I kept on hearing about this perfume on, and as time went by, I really wanted to unpack those notes of lavender and vanilla so much talked about. Some went as far as describing this perfume as Lady Boss-like, masculine leaning, and I just couldn't connect with any of these strong opinions, which at times were also quite polarizing. But as I smelled designer releases more, one day my nose finally detected that lavender aura. And indeed, it's simply strong here, but it's just that one shouldn't expect realistic and natural accord of one. As said previously, it's quite perfumey, which is not necessarily a bad thing all the time. I personally, every now and then, want to drift from overpowering and realistic smelling fragrances and shift rather to a sort of artistic interpretation of one. And very often designer releases provide this opportunity as long as they are not, utilizing cheap ingredients or simplistic accords. And luckily here, it's absolutely not the case. As said before, whilst not being realistic lavender vanilla, it's quite artistic. So again, to me, it's lavender vanilla scent where lavender prevails, and it's surrounded by more notes of herbal street. And vanilla in here just serves as a counteracting role, I suppose, to tone down this excessively herbal concoction. It's again a bit play-doh-y to me, but it doesn't take away anything from this fragrance, in fact. I like wearing one whenever I do not feel smelling like realistic something. And with this perfume, I always feel put together and ready to go, for which reason it's highly recommended as a universal fragrance, including work/office environment. It's quite long-lasting also classic, and it doesn't come across either as overly sweet or excessively fougere. So next flanker I'd like to mention, it's called Libre Intense. Yet again, let's get reminded of the notes that this one is having. So according to Fragrantica, it's pretty much the same as the original. So on the top we've got lavender, mandarin orange and bergamot. In the middle there's lavender yet again, Tunisian orange blossom, jasmine sambac and orchid. And finally in the base there's Madagascar vanilla, tonka bean, ambergris and vetiver. So this one is very similar to original release, as said before, but still they're quite different, especially if tested side by side. Here I do not detect, for example, so much this plasticky play-doh-y anymore. In the opening, this one has slightly more prominent warm accord with a bit of boozy ambery undertone, perhaps. But at the same time, toned down lavender nonetheless comes across as a lot more realistic and natural compared to the OG especially. Similar to natural lavender, it's herby, a bit bitter and a bit dusty. This lavender is not alone here, however. It's joined by something citrusy and effervescent, giving off a bit of soapy and brightening accord. And I suspect it's a combo of orange blossom and bergamot, as the case may be very often. And maybe that's why this lavender, whilst being more quiet compared to OG, is so much more realistic and bright. But of course, it could be simply because of using some other types of lavender oils. But in any case, I think it's quite clever to basically tone down lavender at the same time making it brighter and more natural. It's sort of compromise of the quantity over, versus quality. At one point, I can clearly detect similar vibe with the original, but then this impression sort of comes and goes. Some say that vanilla here is amplified, making this scent sweeter, but not to me. To me, this fragrance is effectively OG, except for lavender is toned down again and a lot brighter version of itself. Plus, this fragrance is even more strong and long-lasting, and to me it has a lot richer herbal variety along with lavender. Maybe it's achieved by extra citrusy floral accords and vetiver in the base. And finally, another flanker which I love, especially in the summer and warmer seasons. So it's called Libre Absolu Platine. So let's get reminded of the notes as far as this one is concerned. So according to Fragrantica, on the top we've got aldehydes, bergamot and mandarin orange. In the middle there's lavender, blue lavender, orange blossom, and finally in the base there's vanilla and amber. So this one to me is probably the most standing apart in the long lineup of Libre flankers. This one is sheer dedication to citrusy orange blossom and neroli, of course. The opening is very bright and sparkly. Straight away I can detect aldehydic accord in combination with bergamot and orange blossom, which again makes the start so soapy and clean. The opening is almost laundresque, I'd have to say. But this bright aldehydic citrusy orange blossom combo is certainly a bit more than just a freshie. And it's probably lavender that gives this combo herby complexity. I can almost detect strong connection with Neroli Portofino by Tom Ford, which to me is this bright and clean orange blossom. Well, here we kind of face the same theme. So in the best traditions of summer release, this flanker is bright, representative of a freshie that's nonetheless quite complex by aldehydic and lavender herbal accords. By the way, aldehydes are done here in a very modern way. They're absolutely nothing like Chanel No. 5 or the likes. And lastly, all that's left to say here would be that it does have a bit of Libre DNA, but as mentioned previously, it's very different, almost to the point of being its own perfume. But that's it, guys. This wraps up the video. If you've liked this video, if you found it of any use, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing and sharing your comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.